I could see a mapped out chart of the world's religions, or the various cultural world religions, literally a family tree.
And there's this very clear correlation to traditional religions going down, and this other stuff is filling the void because we as humans are hardwired to need these things. We need stories. We need kind of ways to explain stuff that we don't understand yet scientifically. I don't really see a distinction between religious beliefs and all these other beliefs. It's all the same thing.
Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a special treat, long overdue. In fact, years ago, I reached out to him to do an interview. Topic probably wasn't at the moment the best topic on the scene, but we found a good reason to discuss today. And I have Matt Baker. He is the creator of UsefulCharts.com. Let's give that shameless plug here for one moment. Matt Baker has UsefulCharts.com. You get you a poster, get you 2, get you 10. I mean, literally, he has the YouTube channel. For those who don't know, you got to go subscribe. Links are down below, but he covers all sorts of stuff. Was Jesus a Muslim? That's a recent one. This one's interesting. Did the Romans create Christianity? Of course, there's all sorts of charts he has. And you can see behind me, like, Islamic prophets family tree. I put this in an actual like frame, and they're really nice. I've had them in all my offices. Now that I'm permanently located here, I'll probably have it in my studio. Norse mythology family tree. I haven't framed up the biblical family tree one yet, but there's some cool charts. It helps you really simplify some of the difficult, genealogies we try to wrap our heads around. Because let me tell you, you get to Genesis chapter 5, you get to the table of nations, and thou begot thoueth, and hithereth thou begotteth, and you're like, I'm going to sleep. This helps keep you from going to sleep. Ancient Egypt's history and mythology. Sorry if the audio's in and out. I'm kind of turning around here. The world history timeline. I mean, like, he's got dozens and dozens of different things. You can get the posters and the book. So fair warning right now, we're living in a tariff nightmare in America, and my friend Matt is attempting to try and send these to you personally. It helps him if you go to the website and buy the book in America. The problem is he can't get it across the border without, packaging his fentanyl book, and trying to force it into your country. Of course, I'm kidding. But on Amazon, you can get the book. Right now, in the meantime, and in the future, we will update this so that you can actually go directly and help Matt out. So subscribe right now if you want true salvation. Useful Charts provides it. And also go to the website, get you a poster, check out the Amazon books and stuff. Welcome to MythVision, my friend. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I have been a fan of MythVision for a long time, and so I'm super happy to appear here. I do want to mention you can buy the charts. There's no problem buying the charts at UsefulCharts.com. It's just the book right now. It's because I'm actually in Canada. So that's the issue. We can ship the charts to the US, no problem. But the book, since it was printed in Thailand, gets tariffed. So you can get it at Amazon. So, but anyway, super excited to be on MythVision. Big fan of MythVision. Yeah.
Matt, you're awesome. And we've been connected for years now. And I'll like email you out of nowhere and like, hey, I want to get one of your posters and stuff. And so you've been a major role in like some of my documentaries where I'm using a point, and I wish I used them longer than I do, but sometimes I'll use them just to get a point across in the middle of a sequence I'm trying to drive home. And I say all that to say, my first question to you, since I'm a lucky guy to have you on, is why? Why did you start this very meticulous, detail-orientated timeline business? channel, etc.? What inspired you?
Yeah. Well, I'm the type of guy who's interested in a lot of things, just like you. But I mean, when you're delving into all kinds of different topics, it often helps to have some context, right? I mean, if we're talking about religion, that's so tied into history. So you need to know history, time periods, what's going on in the Middle East. I mean, if we're just talking about the Bible, that covers like hundreds and hundreds of years where you have different empires coming in and out. So it's a lot to wrap your mind around. And then when you delve into a new topic for the first time, let's say you want to learn about Islam, unfortunately in our school system, we don't often learn much outside of European history or American history. And so, you don't have that context. So when I was younger and learning about things, reading, lots and lots of books is time consuming. And, for a young mind, I couldn't always keep to it. So I always found that, when I was in school textbooks, I'd always flip to the maps, the charts, because then you could kind of get a general idea. Like it's all about like giving yourself an anchor, kind of like getting the lay of the land. So I always loved charts, always used them when I was learning things. And then as I moved into adulthood and I was teaching, I found I would often use charts to explain things to my students. There's some debate over whether there are people who learn visually, people who learn through audio, people who learn through reading. I don't know what the latest research is on that, but from just, my own experience, I do find that for myself personally, I like learning visually. So if I can see things laid out in a chart or a map, I can kind of like get the lay of the land, see where I'm at, and then dive into a topic. I need to get my bearings first. And I've met a lot of other people who are like me. Not everyone. It's interesting when I used to go to fan expos or whatever, and I would sell my charts. Some people would look at a chart and they just walk right on by because it means nothing to them. They're not visual. If I was selling books, maybe they'd stop at a chart. It means nothing. And then other people, they'd be like, whoa. And they just they come straight up to the chart and they just stare, and just not move for a really long time. So I think there's people that are really attracted to visual information and other people that aren't. So because I am someone who likes to learn visually, I just started making charts for myself and for my students. And then eventually, other people were interested. I started selling them kind of just as a hobby. And then it became a little bit of a small business. And, it just spiraled until where I'm at now, where we're a company with about 7 or 8 employees, and we ship all over the world.
I love that. So you mentioned you're a teacher. It might be worth getting some background knowledge about you because, look, this is an interview. We're going to discuss some of the stuff you've discovered along the way, probably that were interesting things through these charts. But I also am curious about you as an individual. So what was your educational background? What did you go to teach? Where did you go? And we'll lead into some of the personal life, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we can dive into this deeper at a later point, but I grew up in the Worldwide Church of God, which I like to use the word cult, even though that's kind of a loaded term. And people are like, well, what's a cult? Isn't everything a cult? Blah, blah, blah. We can talk about that as well if you want. I just call it a cult just to distinguish it from more mainstream Christian denominations. So I grew up in the Worldwide Church of God. It was very insular and all that. So I ended up going to our own church's Bible college, which was located in Texas. Now, if anyone's familiar with the Worldwide Church of God, they're kind of a unique cult in that during the early 90s, they went into a transformation. The original founder had died, and the new leaders eventually kind of re-looked at all the theology they were teaching and realized they were wrong. And then they kind of adopted mainstream evangelical Christianity. So probably something similar to what you grew up in, Derek. So during my college period was when all this was going on. And so at that time, I myself kind of became your typical born again evangelical Christian with a little dose of Pentecostal here and there. became more of that kind of mainstream, very conservative Christian. So I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in theology. We ended up getting some professors, I think, from Fuller Seminary, one of the big seminaries in LA. So I got a pretty solid bachelor's degree in Christian theology. And at the time I was actually teaching computers. That's when the internet first came out in the early 90s. I was teaching computer classes. I even then served a lot. This is something that I don't think a lot of people know about me. So here's a big reveal. I actually worked for a few years as a youth pastor. So that involved quite a bit of teaching. But then eventually I wound up overseas. I kind of, my first wife and I kind of saw ourselves as missionaries. We ended up in Sri Lanka, where we helped start a school in a very poor rural area. And I ended up teaching there for about 10 years overseas, mostly teaching kind of social studies, English as a second language. But during that whole period, both my first wife and I kind of underwent a transformation where, we were both more progressive or liberal leaning. And in terms of the missionary work, we were more interested in helping people, issues around social justice, poverty, education, critical thinking skills. And personally, I'll just speak for myself, but I came to a point where I kind of lost faith. Ended up leaving Christianity, became an atheist. But sorry, you asked about teaching. So through all that period, I was teaching daily in a classroom at a post-secondary school in Sri Lanka.
Wow. So kind of a journey here.
Yeah.
Do you recall some of the things that made you start questioning to kind of...
So many. I mean, it's probably similar to your own journey and to so many people's journeys who end up leaving Christianity. I find a lot of people travel or new experiences or meeting new people is kind of what sparks it. I think I already had my doubts and problems, and I had issues growing up as well. And so for me, I think ending up halfway around the world was kind of me running away from my family, from the church, from all those problems. But then putting yourself in this new environment. I mean, I ended up in Sri Lanka. That's a place where you meet Hindus, you meet Buddhists, you meet all kinds of different Christians, you meet Muslims, you meet travelers. And so immersing yourself in a brand new culture, seeing how the other half lives, it's a poorer country, you start questioning everything. And I think even as a child, I was more of a skeptical person. I was into science. I was into asking all the wrong questions that, the church didn't have easy answers for. So just slowly over time, questioning, and not getting good answers.
Right.
Yeah, probably similar to your own journey.
Yeah, and then we're all on a journey. That's the cool thing about it, right? Is that we need to give each other that freedom to experience and journey. And I feel like some of these charts are maybe even reflections of some of that universal picture you picked up along the way. Because, with me, with MythVision, I start off, I'm very Bible, very Jesus. Don't get me wrong. Even my criticisms, right, are just reflective of the worldview I came out of often. People are like, why are you always talking about? It's what I know the most.
Yeah.
But as I've learned more about classics, learned more about going into that arena of Assyriology and Sumerians and things like that, Egyptians, you start to kind of expand your knowledge. And I see your posters kind of reflecting this constantly growing knowledge that you're learning and saying, hey, I took the time to learn these words. I mean, let's keep it real, right? I've read some scholarship on Islam, right? Dude, if I'm going to keep it 100 with everyone watching right now, the hardest part isn't learning what they're saying. It's the names.
Yeah.
It's the linguistic distance we have when they start talking about Hawa, Kabil, Habayl, Shayth, Shayth, you're like, huh? And if you don't know that cultural linguistic We're not going to be able to track. So here you are simplifying in a way where it's visual. And I do agree with you. So anyway, I guess
it's really weird. In a way, I think growing up evangelical Christian really gets a lot of people interested in ancient history, because so many of the Bible stories are in this ancient land. So you're suddenly like interested in who are the Babylonians, who are the Assyrians, who are the Persians. That's what got me hooked in ancient history, was hearing about all these ancient people through the Bible. And then, of course, then that kind of is a gateway to languages when you start to figure out, wait a second, Hebrew's a different language, Greek's a different language, Persian spoke a different language. And then you have to try to learn a little bit about language, and then you have to learn about history. And then you have to that I don't know, if I hadn't have grown up in that church environment, I don't know if I would have been interested in all these things. And like you said, then you get into like mythology. Well, the Greeks had gods, the Egyptians had gods, the Norse had gods, and you're trying to put it all together and see if there's connections. So definitely, the church was a gateway for me into learning all these different things.
It's interesting the way you just phrased that with connections, because, I get accused with your own testimony. For example, you left. Oh, let's psychoanalyze. Let's find a reason you left. What kind of sin did you hold? What kind of secrets? What kind of problems? Ooh, all of these things, or that you were too radical. Look at, you were willing to go to Sri Lanka, right, for missionary activities. So you were taking it too extreme. You need to be more pop culture, laid back, balanced. And I think I am extreme. Okay. This is the way I am. And I took this serious. Yeah. And that's unfortunate that the very weapon that gets used against me, at least in my dialogues with people who are coming around the apologetic orbit and people who watch them, is you were just a nutter. You were too extreme. You came from fundamentalism. And it's unfortunate that same weapon they can't see. While there may be some truth to this, don't get me wrong, the very thing we were also led us to take it so far in actually exploring this bigger picture of the connections, not only within the genealogies, like you say, isolated charts you've created from Islam. I've got where's my Norse mythology, right? Odin and Thor and the family trees and stuff. But the way you phrased that last sentence was how they are all connected.
Right.
And to me, you kind of do that in this timeline of world history to some degree, but like I could see a mapped out chart of the world's religions, or the various cultural world religions, literally a family tree going from animism. Have you already done that?
Dude, it's right on the wall behind me. See, right?
That's the famous one.
I guess I didn't send you that one. I don't know if you can. It's probably too blurry, but World Religious Family Tree. It's right there by the lamp.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
so
it actually has what's that place in Turkey? Göbekli Tepe at the top, and then it has Egyptian religion and Mesopotamian religion, and it maps it all out. That's more of my recent one.
This is this right here, right?
Yeah, I guess I need to send you this one.
I need this. I need it.
Well, this is based, I did a series on the YouTube channel of Christian denominations, right? And when I was done that, people are like, well, what about Jewish denominations? And then what about Hindu? And of course, denomination isn't quite the right word, but so then I ended up doing a series on all of those, and then I put it all together to show how it's all connected.
Wow, I love that. Okay, so
I guess I'll be sending this to you, Derek.
Definitely need a shameless plug. Get you one as well if you're watching right now. Because I do think there's some connections and clearly differences. It's unfortunate that differences make it isolating in the minds of people.
That's true. I'm not a fan of the idea that all religions are the same and it doesn't matter and they all teach the same God and all that. Well, there's some truth to that, but that's, you got to be careful there. But before we move on, I was talking about my own personal journey and making the connections. Might be a good time to mention kind of from my own timeline point of view. When I was in Sri Lanka, that's when I started working on my PhD. So when I started working on my PhD, it was at the same time that I was losing faith. Mm-hmm. And so as my dissertation topic, it was within a religious studies department. But my supervisor was kind of a psychology guy. So I ended up choosing the topic of why people deconvert. Why do some people who grew up in Christian churches end up leaving, whereas others stay? And the bottom line is that the people who leave don't leave because of morality issues or something like that, which we get accused of. It's usually because they care too much about the truth. It's not that they care too little. They care so much about the truth and getting to the bottom of things and making connections and finding out what's real that they study, ask questions, and that leads them on a path to then explore all kinds of other things. You can see behind me, I've got an evolution chart there. They learn about evolutionary biology and how the world came to be made. They start learning about other cultures, all these sorts of things. So, I mean, there are loads of psychologists that have looked into this. And most people that end up lose faith because they've asked so many questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my research was I used the Myers-Briggs theory, which I know your listeners are going to say there's problems with that. Yeah, I admit it. There's problems with that. But I also use something called the Big Five personality test and so forth. But I basically used a bunch of psychological measures looking at people who left Christianity versus those that stayed. And all these measures that measure things like curiosity, skepticism, wanting to dig into the bottom of things, people who leave are all high on those measures, whereas people who stay are more high on being more interested in keeping social cohesion and obeying the rules and just doing what they were taught. So yeah, there's a psychological component to why some of us leave and some don't. And I'm not making judgments either way. People are different. And so, yeah.
So I'm glad you brought this up. And in fact, I think it's worth doing because I've been guilty of psychoanalyzing people that have contentious views against what I'm presenting, usually within the apologetic world, popular channels like Inspiring Philosophy. I'm friends with Michael Jones. We had our hiccups and of course we're cool now, but I'm not trying to make our beliefs cause us not to be able to be friendly. And in fact, don't become the very thing you're trying to oppose in your religious or anti-religious world. Especially with my broadened view of things, it's like, I want to befriend everyone as long as they're not like outright doing crazy stuff that I think are bad. So I can't help but come from where I came out of when I'm hearing these arguments that just don't pan out to be the logical conclusion. And your research and PhD studies seems to suggest that there are various reasons, various causes potentially, but oftentimes the reason that I would have gone down the path I did, where Ruslan writes me and tells me, man, you're radical, I do accept that. I do say, yeah, man, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was hardcore in this. And my advice to Christians, and this is what I told him, and I even told this to Michael Jones in private, it was like, chill. Don't take it too serious. If you know how to be copacetic within whatever the world is, and you could tell morally, like, nah, we ain't doing that slavery crap. Nah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to treat women that way. We're going to, then cool, keep it. If it works for you, go for it. But if you're like me, man, and you have to go, what did Paul say? Why would I accept what this guy just said? Do I even need this? And there's this emotional component. I'd love to have you elaborate on this because maybe you have talked about this somewhere in your writings. There's this like meaning is wrapped around the experience of that worldview. And there's this idea that if you remove that, or if that isn't true, there is no meaning, there is no morality, there is no foundation. And so you're asking the person who believes this to neglect or reject that experience they had, which is practically impossible at that moment where they're at in their experience, to get them to question the thing they know to be true because of their experience. And man, that's a difficult thing,
Yeah, I mean, First thing I want to say is yeah, we shouldn't use this kind of psychoanalyzing to pigeonhole people and make assumptions about people. This kind of research, it's very broad. It's just kind of like looking for major patterns. We should never apply this stuff to individuals and say, oh, this individual's this kind of personality, that's why they're so weird and X, Y, and Z. No, we're just talking broad here. Okay. I just want to make people understand that. But it's interesting because people who leave Christianity are usually accused of being they're accused of having had some emotional problem or something happen in their lives, or they got into some immorality or something, and that's what led them out. Whereas the people who stay, they're the ones who are keeping logical and everything. But the research has actually kind of shown it's the opposite. Those who leave often leave because they're too intellectual. They're too focused on the actual logic of it all, and they want to learn, they want to study, and that leads them out. Whereas those who stay often stay because of some sort of emotional attachment to their church or to a person or to an experience they had, like some amazing faith experience. And like you said, I don't discount that. If someone's like, I had this amazing experience, it's more than my life, and this has led to what I believe, that's all cool, unless unless it leads you to commit genocide or be horrible to people.
Right.
But yeah, it's important to realize that, people make their faith decisions or non-faith decisions for different reasons. And when it comes to people who leave religion, it's often for more intellectual reasons. And I wish the religious people would understand that.
We had a perfect example last night outside of religion. My brother, right? Huge enthusiast on UFO stuff, huge enthusiast on ghosts. He believes there are spirits and stuff that haunt houses, like these YouTube videos where the door moves. Like, he is sucked in and really, really, really thinks this, right? And we had a really wonderful conversation because he knows my mind is thinking like Scooby-Doo. Yeah. At the end, you got to unmask or find out what the phenomena is behind what's actually happening. Yeah. There's two approaches. And I think the threshold of critical thinking on his side is more he accepts it first and then needs to be shown that it isn't true after.
Right.
I question and need to be shown validity. You got to really work hard to prove the claim. And because of that kind of gap, it's almost impossible to consider Wolfman or Yeti or Bigfoot or any of this stuff in dialogue, because he starts with, it is true. And yeah, there's different fake accounts of it. Yeah, people are, but one of them or two of them are authentic. And so we come from a completely different kind of avenue. And have you ever thought about expanding into that kind of stuff, like charting out your PhD in some way to explain these things? Have you thought about charting out these strange world, mythologies from Chupacabra to Bigfoot? Right. Dude, that would be a fantastic chart.
Yeah. That's a good one. I keep a list of ideas. I definitely at some point want to do kind of philosophies as opposed to religion. But then, I don't know what you would call what you're talking about it. I generally use the term woo-woo, which is maybe not nice. But kind of the para world. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, just throwing an idea out there. But that dialogue, man, it's your patience gets tested, I'm sure, in both directions, because they're frustrated at me because I'm not as I would call gullible. I'm not as gullible. And I'm frustrated because I'm going, how do I get them to really think about, how can I educate them to seeing the science behind misperception, assuming agency, all the things we learned within the scientific realm to question before, and realize humans are prone to we're literally prone to believe this stuff.
Yeah, totally. And that's why, as you see the decline of traditional religions, we're seeing the rise of other, use the word mythologies, and I think that's the perfect word. Whether it's Star Wars mythology that I guess people don't actually believe in, but they actually get into it in a way. There are people that catalog everything as much as people would catalog Bible stuff. or they're into stuff they actually believe, like ghosts or ESP or whatever it is. And there's this very clear correlation to traditional religions going down, and this other stuff is filling the void because we as humans are hardwired to need these things. We need stories. We need kind of ways to explain stuff that we don't understand yet scientifically. We need these placeholders, to wrap our minds around things. Like, one of the worst things that can happen to us is having a loved one die. And so, it's more comfortable for us to believe in ghosts or the ability to talk to spirits, because that helps us, right? So yeah, there's this clear correlation. Like I don't really see a distinction between religious beliefs and all these other beliefs. It's all the same thing. And even within the atheist sphere, there's kind of atheists even that have these kind of mythological beliefs because we're humans. We're hardwired for it. Your lucky hat or your lucky shirt, or this stuff is in everyone's life. And it's not necessarily all about saying this is bad and this is good. It's about, I think, learning the proper place for these sorts of beliefs.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much you said there that we're 100% aligned on this. And I think in your timeline of your personal life, you described becoming an atheist for a moment. And let me tell you, before you continue, so you feel a little more comfortable, almost like we're in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. My name's Derek and I'm an alcoholic. Let me share you some secrets about the crazy stuff I did. Where I'm at right now, Matt, if I'm totally transparent, look, I'm a skeptic. The term skeptic means you already accept that you don't believe it or something. Someone said they don't like the term because it kind of gives us like, I'm not open to the idea. I use the term because truly I'm not persuaded. I've heard it. I've listened to these things, and there are other ways to explain the data, near-death experiences. Okay, we can get into memory. We can get into dreams and this idea of DMT, this natural chemical in the brain that kind of releases, that causes you to have a hallucinatory experience, which is also going to be factored in by background knowledge. If it's Buddhism, you might see something that's Eastern. Right. Hinduism, it's many gods. If it's Christianity, it's Jesus. If it's Muhammad, et cetera, et cetera. All these things, right? However, what you just tapped into in the last sentence, as someone who doesn't think these things are literally true, I think I like to use truth in a different term. I like the idea that you talked about. Star Wars has so much truth in it. Yeah. Game of Thrones had so much truth in it. I love these mythologies, and they're true, not in any historical, verifiable, whatever. They're true as the linguistic message they're trying to convey. And there are many things in these myths, including modern ones like Game of Thrones, that I would say are false and should not be practiced or followed. And then there's some like gray areas, right, within the modern context where we all as primates have these tendencies of behaving certain ways. There's taboos. There's all sorts of stuff that the Bible would present or any other mythic framework in the ancient world might present. And so you talked about it, that there's going to be a black hole that's filled with meaning. I think that the storytelling gives us meaning.
Yep.
We need meaning. We need these stories or myths, if you will. Maybe not everyone. There might be some introverts that are so rational that they live in some way. They're just the oddball in terms of the general humans, I think, overall experience. And so I don't mean that derogatory. I'm just saying that like built different. Like I hear them and they talk about even introvert Christians who go, I never had an experience. I never had this. It's the rational, logical argument of Jesus that maybe, and I'm like, we don't see eye to eye here because this, right. I said all of that to say, I think meaning needs to be, and I understand the tool for our evolution and how we would be using these religions, philosophies to cope with our existence and how to navigate the world. That being said, where did you go from this point? Are you seeing what I'm seeing and saying, hey man, maybe we hit this wall and go, okay, maybe it is just chemicals and science and all this stuff. And now what? Therefore, we just constantly robotically talk about how, all right, we evolved, a lot of death's been on planet Earth. Okay, none of these religions literally happened. How do we cope? I'm still a human, I'm not a robot yet. If I evolved into a robot through my learning, then maybe I wouldn't have this problem, but I still need meaning and stuff. So I rambled there, but
Yeah. I have so much to say on this. Do you have another 2 hours? First off, I want to say I love that you call your channel MythVision and you incorporate that word myth. I don't know what umbrella terms you see for yourself for the channel, but I'm sure you have a lot of atheists that follow you. I'm sure some religious folks as well, but you're kind of, you're taking things from the critical point of view, skeptical point of view. So, you might imagine you'd call your channel critical vision or skeptical vision or something like that, but you call it myth vision, which I think is great. Mythology. I think so many people think of mythology as a dirty word. Like when I talk about the Bible being myth or the Bible being legend, so many people say, well, then that means it's not true, or it's false, or it's wrong, or this is my favorite, it's lies. The Bible is a bunch of lies. And that is absolutely the wrong word, lie. Like the 600 BCE, someone in ancient Judea, some priest didn't say, ha, 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 I'm going to write a bunch of lies to fool people so that 2,600 years from now, people will still be believing my lies. The Bible writers weren't writing lies. They were writing myth and legend. And I think a lot of times they knew it. Like, this is not really my area of expertise, so I don't know, did the average Greek guy actually believe in Apollo on his chariot marching across the sky? I don't think that he did. Maybe some people did, but I think the philosophers and, the real thinkers of the time period, whether it was Judea or Greece or Egypt, I think a lot of these people knew that they were writing mythology. And it's not that ancient people were dumb and now we're modern people and we know, that's a bunch of lies and we know better because we have science. I think at the time, they knew they were writing mythology. They knew it wasn't true in the sense of whatever science they had of the day. And that's okay. Like, I think nowadays we still need mythology because there's still a lot we don't know. Like, we think of, because we're in the year 2025, we think, our science is so great, we understand everything, and all those poor people in the past didn't. Well, I guess people 1,000 years from now will think the same about us, like, those poor people in 2025. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that I think there's still room for mythology, because mythology fills the gap of things that we can't understand. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm also not saying that at some point in the future, we'll reach a point where we don't need mythology because we'll have understood everything. I don't think we ever get to that point, because I think there is always going to be a space for mythology, because there are different types of truth, of understanding. And some people are going to hate this. I'm sure you're familiar with Karen Armstrong.
yes.
Okay. So in one of her early books, she talked about mythos and logos. Have you heard those terms before in this kind of context? Logos, is kind of the science way of understanding things. We can talk about love and we can say, what is love? Love is, these chemicals in our brain that, evolved so that we could be in bonded pair groups and raise our children together and pass on our genes. And there's a scientific way of explaining things. That's logos. But then there's mythos. You think of all the romantic poets of, medieval and, early modern period and how they talk about love and all this sort of stuff. And that's mythos. So which one's true? What is love? Is it all this lovely poetry and the feelings that we have when we're with the people we love? Or is it all this sciencey stuff? Well, it's both. And this is where when we're talking about really big ideas such as meaning, what's the meaning of all of this? Or where did the universe come from? Or, all these sort of big questions. There's a lot of things that science can't give us answers to. And so I see no problem with relying on mythologies to answer those questions. The problem is that when you take those mythologies literally, and all these things literally happened, the problem is when you try to take science or some sort of scientific logical way of thinking and apply it to your mythology, which is what literalist Christians do. And I think they're missing the point. They're losing out on this mythology is teaching us something about morality, about meaning, perhaps even about higher end philosophical things like where the world came from, where it's going, all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, I'm just disappointed that people think mythology is a dirty word.
Thank you so much for being an apologist for the name of my channel. But sincerely, everything you said, 100%, I'm on the same page because, Christians will go, how could you turn your back on Christ if you claim you had that experience? And it's like, my friend, I still have experiences. And what's wild is it's now out of the context of being Christian. And like you described, I'm viewing these materials differently. My moral compass is intact. If anything, it's perfected better than it was before. It's always going to need work. And that's the cool thing too. I think when you have revelation that claims once for all, it's unfortunate because I want my son to see me as a model, a standard that he can look up to, but to surpass me. I don't want, if any modeled revelation people have supposes the once for all truth, as you find in many Islamic circles and fundamentalist Christian circles, it's unfortunate because you now peaked. You can't question whether or not, you have to find loopholes to explain away the slavery or try to defend it. All these things we find within our text that they have as revelation as the standard model. No, with mythology, it rolls and it perfects and it critiques itself, as we see within the Greek models of Heracles. Heracles was doing dirty deeds to women all the time. Later, the cynics metaphorized those things. Zeus, those were metaphors. He could never actually have done those things. So we have to understand these as symbols or symbolic. And so they're critiquing their own tradition. And if your tradition isn't allowing growth in that, then you're in the wrong tradition, in my opinion. And again, I'm with you. I love that you point this out. Everything is touched on in mythology. And I guess where I'm coming from is when you talked about the love, you gave such a good example of, is it really just chemical compounds? Based down to the evidence, sure, you could probably say, hey, in the world, what's actually happening are these things, and you don't even psychologically or consciously have awareness of the reason this is for your survival. This is how you're coping, but your experience in your interpretive framework is through that artistic experiential interpretation. Like, well, what color is that? Well, if we talk about it in a scientific term, not through our language says red. Science might describe it in some crazy explanation that might be more factual. But red to me is similar to blood. It's symbolism, it's meaning. So we actually interpret everything through symbols, and that's how we live. And I don't think we're ever going to live outside a symbol. I don't think we're ever going to evolve to be robots. That was my point. And I hit a wall where I'm trying to be so robotic about everything. And sure, I want to be factual. But dude, what am I doing? I feel like I'm wasting my life not living in the art, living the symbol. And so final thing I want to say is this, The Life of Pi is what came to mind when he said that.
I love that book. Yeah.
Dude, the movie is all I saw. I never read the book. I imagine the book's better.
Yeah.
Movie, he's crying at the end. The journalist who's being factual reporting what took place. And the Chinese who come to him and say, our ship sank, we need, this is not going to suffice. The animals on a boat. And spoiler alert right now, if you haven't watched it, do watch it.
Yeah.
Tune out or skip ahead a minute ahead from now. If you haven't, you must watch it.
Or read the book.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell the spoiler. he's talking and the guy can't believe it. Even this guy can't believe, just like the Chinese who are finding out about their ship. We need the real story. We need the truth, right? There's two truths being discussed here, it seems.
Yeah.
And finally, he goes, I told him another story. My mom and the bad cook and all this stuff, and they lived off of the flesh of humans on this boat in order to survive. And there's tears running down both of their faces. And the guy knows this is the real thing that happened. And he goes, okay, which story do you think happened? And he's like, that one. And he's like, yeah, but which story do you like better?
All right.
And he's like, the animals. And he's like, the same is true with God. It was like, dude, like, even if God is a reflection of our own imagination, our own cognitive abilities, scientifically, we can explain it's reflective. It's somehow us projecting and giving meaning and giving agency to things. Okay, cool, dude. Derek, you figured out what God may be in fact. It still doesn't take away how we experience and how we are going to perceive. Therefore, how can I get comfortable? How can I, as a human who realizes 99% of the world's probably never going to really recognize this or even accept this because it's too much. I don't know if we're ever going to get to that level of education where we're able to cope with that reality. I don't know if I'm preaching here, bro, but
Yeah. No, I like it. I think the one difference I'd say is that in that story, there was an explanation for what happened that could be figured out scientifically, right? That it was the mom, the cook, and the eating and all that. Whereas in certain things in life, where bigger questions like where the universe came from, that we don't have that. Like, well, we actually do know everything now, or there's this God story. So choose. We're not to that point yet. There's still a lot of stuff we don't know, and there's this God story. And so to me, the God story is kind of a placeholder still until, like I said earlier, I don't know that we ever will figure out certain stuff, because we have limitations as humans. It's just like an ant will never figure out, that there's these huge humans walking around that have vehicles and trains and airplanes. Maybe we as humans will never quite understand things. A couple things I wanted to say. One, I talked about mythos and logos. Another way, perhaps a better way, is science and the humanities. At some point, I think a couple hundred years ago, science and humanities were kind of divided. And now on university campuses, you have the science buildings and the humanities buildings. And that has done this huge disservice to us as humans in that we now think in two different categories. Right. Or I think in earlier times, people thought of science and humanities together because we always need the poetry, the art, the music. And I see religion as part of the humanities. It's just an artistic, a literary, I like to say on my channel a lot, the Bible is literary, not literal. And that doesn't mean it's useless. It doesn't mean it's lies. It doesn't mean it's false. It's just a different way of explaining things. You can't explain everything using the historical method or the scientific method or archaeology or this or that. So religion is like an art form. It's mythology. It's a way to explain stuff that is beyond our understanding. Now, all of this, you actually started with the question. You wanted to know where I went from my period. So maybe I'll get into that. As most people, if anyone knows my channel, they'll know I'm Jewish now. I converted to Judaism. My current wife is Jewish. I didn't convert to get married. That was not necessary. I actually converted to Judaism many years after the wedding. And it wasn't anything that I did just because I had to. I did so because I wanted to. So a lot of people assume that I'm Jewish. Maybe if they don't know that I'm a convert, they think I'm one of those atheist Jews, because there's a lot of Jews that are Jews ethnically, and they don't believe in God or anything from Judaism. But that's not me. I consider myself a theist, not atheist, a theist, as in I do believe in God. I'm a Jew by choice. I converted to Judaism. because I like Judaism and it makes sense to me. Now, I hesitate a lot of times, maybe to just say that without explanation, because people assume certain things about Jews, especially if they were raised in the environment that you and I were raised in.
Right.
In the mainstream evangelical Christian world. When you think of a Jew, from that context, you think of someone who is bogged down in rules and the law, and they don't know freedom in Christ. And they're in this chains of the law and all the rules and all this sort of stuff. And so that was my idea of Judaism growing up. And to some extent, there are some branches of Judaism that maybe are kind of like that. But even that is not a good picture, even of the most Orthodox Jews. But most Jews, especially in America, are not Orthodox Jews, certainly not ultra-Orthodox Jews. Reform Judaism is the largest Jewish denomination in North America. Conservative Judaism is second, and that word is horrible because when you think conservative, you think right-wing, or you think literalist or whatever, but conservative Judaism is not very conservative at all. It's very liberal, very progressive. And then there's Reconstructionist and all kinds of other different parts of Judaism. So I came to realize at some point that Judaism, modern Judaism, is not this rigid, we just obey all these rules to obtain salvation. Jews actually aren't even interested in salvation. And a lot of the stuff they do just because it's a tradition. What really sold me on Judaism was when I learned that Jews loved question, that questioning, being full of doubts, asking questions is a central part of Judaism. And I'm like, yes, I love it because I ask questions, I'm critical, I have doubts. And basically in Judaism, they're like, great, we allow that. And especially the more progressive forms, it's all about asking big questions. And I've even heard, I forget the book, a Reformed Jewish rabbi say, like, the word God is kind of a placeholder for things we don't understand. So we choose to call God God, but that doesn't mean he's that old guy with the beard up in the sky, or however other ways you want to understand more literally. So for me, accepting Judaism, well, the other thing, I do have to say this. So I don't think I would have converted to Judaism if I wasn't married to a Jew, because I think Judaism is, in a sense, a bit of a tribe that you either are born into or you marry into. There are some people who just maybe join with no connection at all, but I feel it's good to have some connection. Plus, I was raised, the cult that I grew up in, the Worldwide Church of God, it was more of a Judeo-Christian cult. We did more quote unquote Old Testament stuff than New Testament stuff. So I was raised keeping the Sabbath, keeping the Feast of Tabernacles and Passover, all this Jewishy stuff. So the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, was the part of the Bible I knew the best and liked the best.
I agree.
And so Judaism seemed like an easy fit for me. And actually, at this point, I am going to make my own video on this topic because people ask me all the time, why did you become a Jew? If you think of the three big Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, let's just take Christianity because that's the one I think most people listening are probably familiar with. You can be a Christian and believe that most of the Old Testament is mythology. There are plenty of Christians out there who think that Moses, the Exodus, didn't actually happen. It's a legend. It's a founding legend. They might believe in the documentary hypothesis and all this sort of stuff. And they're on board with all this stuff that, it's not until kind of the Assyrian period where things get historical. They'll agree with all of that. Okay. But if you're a Christian, when you get to Jesus has to be historical. And not only does Jesus have to be historical, but his resurrection has to be historical. I mean, there are some really, really, really liberal Christians that maybe see Jesus as a big metaphor. But from a theological point of view, most denominations out there, even the most liberal ones, Jesus and that he was the Son of God and that he died for our sins and was resurrected and now he's up there as part of the Trinity, that has to be taken literally. Even if you don't take Adam and Eve and all this stuff literally, that has to be taken literally. Okay. Personally, I have a problem with that. Like, there came a point in my life where I knew enough about religion, about ancient history, about Judea, about all this stuff that I can't bring myself to believe that Jesus was God and that he died and he rose again. As a historical fact, I can't say that happened. In Islam, it's kind of similar. Like, in Islam, you have to believe that Muhammad was the last prophet and that the Quran was revealed to him, and that the Quran is the ultimate revelation to humankind. And that's an historical fact, and it's true. So both Christianity and Islam have these things that you have to believe are historical and real and literal, even if you throw away all the rest. Not throw away, sorry. That was wrong to say.
Not take literally.
Yeah, not take literally. Okay. But in Judaism, like I say, I'm speaking as a Reformed Jew here. There are certain Orthodox Jews who will say, yes, Moses was real and historical and Adam and Eve were real and historical. But most Jews understand all of that as myth and legend. And so for most progressive Jews, there's nothing in the Bible that you have to take literally. So in Judaism, there's this freedom to understand it all within mythos, to understand it all as myth and legend, to understand it as humanities, to understand it as tradition, to understand that this is literature. And then what a lot of people don't understand about Judaism is it doesn't end with the Hebrew Bible. There's all this stuff that comes after. And Jews are continuously, asking questions and all this sort of stuff. The word Israel means wrestling with God. Jacob, that's when he got that name. Israel was when he wrestled with God in the night and God changed his name to Israel. And so Israel is, okay, loaded term, Israel. We can come back to that. But Israel means one who wrestles with God. So Jews wrestle with God to this day. And it doesn't mean that they have every answer and that, a lot of people think that Jews think of themselves as the chosen people and that they're special and all that. That is not the Jewish understanding of the word chosen people. Jews don't think they're the one true religion. Christians think they're the one true religion. Islam thinks they're the one true religion. Maybe Buddhism thinks they're the one true religion. Beyond those three, every other religion out there, including Judaism, says, this is our religion for us. You might have your religion over in India. That's for you. We're not saying it's wrong. That's your religion. This is our religion. This is our tribe. That's your tribe. It's all good. Judaism doesn't have this requirement of we're right and everyone else is wrong. You have to believe everything in our books as literal. So I looked at that and I was like, that's a religion I can get into. I'm already married to a Jew. I grew up with all this stuff. Why not?
It's almost like the way you described it. And by the way, I'm sure we could find some bad examples. There's always bad apples everywhere. But there's people who always highlight like certain rabbis that are fundamentalist, right? That are extreme, that might hold to something. But this is the odd part about that. I'm like, why are we looking at 5 people on the planet when Jews make up less than 1% of anyone on the planet? It's an odd thing to go and find some radical extremist in that particular camp when you've got billions in both of the other categories. So the other thing I wanted to make the point is it's almost like the only advantage I would say that Judaism has, from the example I'm going to give on starting a religion, as some have said with Star Wars or other myths, is it has a deep, deep rooted antiquity. So it has a continuity of tradition. So you feel like you're actually touching.
Rooted in something.
Yeah, it's rooted in the distant past. It's touched the empires. I mean, it's been in the shadow of the greatest civilizations the world has ever seen.
Geography. That's why they're still fighting over that land, because it's in the middle of everything. And let me say right now, for anyone wondering, I don't support what Israel is doing to Palestine. I consider it a genocide. I think it's awful. I don't know what your views are, but I'm just going to put that out there. That was actually one thing when I was converting that I was worried about. As a Jew, do I have to support Israel? And I came to the conclusion that no, Israel is a political state. Judaism is a religion. For a lot of people, they go together, but they don't have to. I know lots of Jews that are pro-Palestinian. So yeah, sorry, that came to my mind when you said, well, there are bad Jews. And I'm like, yeah, there's bad Jews, especially these days. But we're not talking about politics here. We're talking about religion and beliefs.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have to add your 2 cents here, because I know a lot of people might go, hold on. And immediately they're going to think that.
And that's a real pain that when people hear the word Jew now, they just think, oh, you support Israel.
Right.
That's not necessarily, those are 2 different things.
Yeah. Same with Justin Sledge, right? So we talk with Esoterica. Justin Sledge is in the same way as you, and I think he's a Reformed Jew. And again, I asked him too, because like
he's Reconstructionist, but it's
okay.
All the R's, Reconstructionist, Reform, Renewal, they're all kind of,
okay.
Yeah, they have little differences, but they're progressive on the progressive side. Yeah,
my bad. It's kind of interesting too. I'm like, do you think Yahweh is real? And he's like, he doesn't say absolutely there's nothing, but like he's like kind of like, no, these are stories. Like, and I think that can.
Hey, it's okay for stories.
Absolutely. In fact, I think that when we get comfortable with realizing that's what they are, and maybe even being reflective of the ancient mindset of the human who perceives this deity, once we recognize that, I think that we'll be a lot better off. It can defang some of the literalist extremisms about geopolitics, religious activities, our morality, how we treat people. There's so much here. And I feel like that's kind of what your whole philosophy with these charts, your website, what you're attempting to do is almost map everything that we can in a category that helps us see the bigger connection of humanity, the connection within the little bubbles that are inside. So you're very able to zoom in and see, all right, this is Buddhism. Look at that. Look at the different break-off sects and their arguments, and these are the different families. The same with the Bible, every culture, but then also there's this back up. We're not so different after all.
Mm-hmm.
We're much more connected than you realize. And when you realize that, you're doing what I would say a global gospel mission, the real good news. And that is that we're all really connected. Let's cut the crap. This tribalistic division that we have amongst ourselves needs to end. But they feel like it's an attack. And it's like, no. If we could get you to see your ideology in a different way, keep the tradition, keep the package, don't feel like I'm trying to take everything from you, but like, let's reform it again. Let's do something with it that allows you to then no longer have this weird belief. It reminds me of that, the magician and mentalist, Darren Brown. He had a fantastic episode. He's got a whole series of them on YouTube. They're free to watch. But I think you can watch some of them that aren't on YouTube on like Netflix or one of these places. Darren Brown. Now he's an atheist, but he knows like how the human mind works and operates, and he knows how to like trick people and make them think things. He even convinces an atheist to believe in God on the show and actually shows how he does it, right? So it's fantastic to show this. But then there was this one episode, and it's like I think this one you have to watch on one of those paid Netflix or Hulu or something. And he takes this guy from somewhere in like the South, probably where I'm at in Florida. And he brings him in as part of this experiment where they're testing this new technology, and he plants this thing in his neck, and then he trains him to watch these videos, and he's doing patterns to get his mind trained up. And the guy does not have a clue that this is all really an experiment on him. And this thing, they actually cut his neck, like really with a scalpel, like through a procedure to make him believe how real this thing was that they're planting, right? And what they're really doing is just getting this guy to believe that this is really doing it when it's really not. Psychology and all this stuff. At the end of the day, he, at the beginning when they interviewed all these people, was one of the most extreme anti-immigration, like crazy stuff that goes on, like seeing Mexicans as other than, which, wow, right now is a hot time, right? I'm not trying to make this political. This is actually religiously based, though it's necessary, I think, to make the point here. He's echoing a lot of the sentiments that we hear, okay, where I'm from. And there's a moment where he sits in front of a Native American. There's a native there. And there's this experiment. I don't know the history behind this experiment. He says, I want you to stare at him for 5 minutes in the eyes. Lock eyes.
Yeah.
They lock eyes. Within 2 minutes, he's crying.
Yeah.
He's tearing up. He says, can I hug you? And the native did not even, there was no words exchanged when the cry started. It made me cry. I was like, yo, this is good. And so he gets up and he walks over and he hugs him. And there's this moment where he's like, I feel like I know you. Now, that changed everything. Then they did a DNA trace and saw where he's from. He himself has all this different bloodline that traces across the world, mapping out the useful chart of his own DNA. And then at the end, there's a moment where these bikers, who are like part of a white club of bikers, are treating these natives who come into the bar like shit, and they're about to fight. And they had already befriended him. And they put on a coat, on a jacket, made him feel like he's one of them. But because of all the buildup and stuff that he did in this experiment, there's this moment they're banking, hoping that he does the right thing and that it works. Right. And at the end, they pull guns out. It's all staged, but he doesn't know it. It seems real. And they're aiming like they're going to shoot them. And they're saying, you don't have a green card. You're not one of us. And the dude stands in front of the bullet and says, no, guys, no. And like he, through the fear, stood in between and they shot. His jacket had blood pouches, making it look like it was real. He thought he got shot and there's blood showing up. Then it all unravels, right? And they show him and they say, you're a hero. And it was just, I guess what I'm saying is the us versus them tribalism.
Yeah.
I don't think we're ever going to get rid of all there ever will be with this, but like, maybe we can get to a point where wars won't be necessary, where we can try to mitigate or minimize through that kind of educational process. I don't know. I'm hoping. That's my hopeful thought.
Yeah. There's something I want to say in response to that. That you're absolutely right. Tribalism is very hardwired in us and is the cause of so many problems, right? Religions fighting against religion, political states fighting against political states. That leads some people to believe, and there have been attempts to do this, if only we could merge all our religions into one big meta religion and all our countries into one big meta country, and we can all speak one big meta language, that would be the solution. And I don't think that is the solution, because I think there's nothing wrong with there existing different religions, different tribes, different languages, different countries. But yeah, obviously we need to learn to get along. One thing I want to say though, going back to me choosing Judaism, I could have, so I found myself at the point as an atheist that a lot of atheists, I think, find themselves at, where they're not quite happy. They've gotten rid of all their stuff, but then they're like, okay, but there's this void. So what do I do now? And so I was at that point, and, I wanted something. So I could have easily chosen Unitarian Universalism or something, because that's actually almost identical to Reformed Judaism. I could have chosen, well, I'm going to become, I'm a white guy. I could choose some sort of Anglo-Saxon paganism and understand it all as mythology, but have that in my life. And some people do that route. I chose Judaism because I was kind of raised in it and it made sense to me. And like you said, so many Christians are so already used to the mythology of the Hebrew Bible. Why then would you want to create a religion about Star Wars or something, or Lord of the Rings? So I think the problem comes in so many people I meet. They say, well, I'm spiritual, not religious. And what they mean is they dabble in a little bit of everything. And I think the problem with that, as is the problem with creating like a meta culture or meta religion, is when you mix everything together, it ends up becoming a big sloppy goo that doesn't actually make a lot of sense. The best analogy I have for it is, say you like sports, And in a lot of ways, sports are all the same. It's all about winning and it's all about teamwork and all that sort of thing. So you might say, well, all sports are the same. So let's combine them. Let's play basketball, baseball, hockey. Like, let's give everyone sticks and a basketball and, let's mix them all together. And if you combine all sports, it wouldn't make sense. Like, you couldn't play we're playing all the sports at the same time thing.
Right.
Right. So you see what I'm saying? Like, all sports are the same, but in order to really experience a sport, you have to play a sport by that sport's rules. So why did I choose Judaism instead of just dabbling in a little bit of everything or just having a general mythology? I think to truly gain something from a mythology, you kind of have to choose a lane and stay in that lane. That's not to say that you don't pay attention to other things and learn from other things, but you can't really, truly, celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, all the things equally. So I think it's important to kind of so go back to what you're saying about the tribalism thing. I just wanted to clarify that the goal is not to break down tribes and to put everybody into one big melting pot. It's more if everybody was in their tribe or their religion or in their mythology or whatever, learn to appreciate others and respect others, but to work within a certain framework, because that's how mythology works. You can't really, understand a particular mythology with mixing it with everything else at the exact same time. Do you get a sense of what I'm saying?
Yeah, because each of these different models, right? It seems like many of these religious ideologies are working toward that. Christianity actually is attempting to put all in one pot. Everyone from every tribe, nation, kindred, tongue, the whole nine, right? In one pot. But they must also adopt the motto and believe their mythos in order to be in that. And they think the solution, the world solution, is make everyone Christian. And if everyone can become Christian, we'll solve the problem. But then you also have to believe in these things, right? At least they are pushing for the historicity, the literalism of, and I get it. They think it's a commendable thing. They've seen good in the world from it. There's also been bad in the world from these things. But, how do you look at it, right? If I were talking about Alexander the Great, we might look at it and glorify in the adventures he did all across Persia and conquering the world. But I imagine looking from the tribal perspectives or the regions he conquered, he was probably the most villainous, heinous, evil individual until his mythos and narrative actually ended up being adopted by the people who ended up getting crushed by them. So they have to accept or die kind of thing. And how we perceive also tells you the kind of the gray area of morality and all of this as well. And you're able to do that within a tradition you hold to. The other model, like you said, is let's put them all in one. I'm not saying stop practicing your customs and your traditions or have this deep-rooted fascination with your family and the history behind it. In that form of tribalism, I don't think it necessarily is going to cause any long-term or any ultimate issue. I can't put my finger on all the problems. I know that like Sam Harris and all these guys often want to blame religion, and don't get me wrong, there may be aspects of this that they're right about, but you can do that with politics. You can do that with other things as well. I think the condition, as Christians might say, is human. They just want to give the mythos. That's the reason. I tend to think like, how can we be proud of our own customs, our own history of whatever the mythos we have, but yet it doesn't lead to the other, our enemy, and therefore, like, when can we get to a place? And I don't know if we'll ever get there, bro. It's all,
I don't know,
wishful. Yeah.
I do want to make it clear. I absolutely am never saying that anyone should become a Jew like me. That worked for me because of very personal circumstances. But I do feel bad for a lot of post-Christians or former Christians out there. Like you were saying earlier, it's like you were born with a mythology, and that is the mythology of the Hebrew Bible. And that's the one you're used to more so than, say, some sort of ancient European, Anglo-Saxon, whatever. And you kind of miss it. And I wish there was something kind of the equivalent to, say, Judaism for Christians who want to keep all that stuff, but not necessarily literally. And I suppose there are some liberal denominations out there that are like that, but I'm pretty sure most of them at least want you to accept that Jesus was real and all that sort of stuff. Who is it? I found it interesting. James Tabor. I saw one of his videos. He has a new book about the Abrahamic faith. Is it James Tabor?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like he actually came out with like kind of his religious view, and like to me, it sounds very similar to what I've chosen, except he's not using the label Judaism. He calls it Hebrew faith, and it's like he sees it all as mythology, and Jesus is a mythology as well. But he's keeping it because he thinks that it makes sense to him, and it does, right? And it's important to him. I just wish there was something like that for more people, because when I was doing my PhD research, I talked to a lot of atheists, and so many of them were missing something. Like they wanted something else. And let me take it on back to MythVision. I think that's why a lot of people like MythVision, because you're not afraid to talk about myth and mythology and talk about the Bible. And it's like so many other atheists want to throw all that stuff out as bonkers and useless. But you're like trying to tread that middle ground between science and the humanities, mythology, and say we need both. And so I think your channel kind of creates this environment for people that are skeptical, are questioning, are doubtful, but love the stories, love the Bible, love to talk about all this stuff. It's in their veins. They can't talk about it enough. And you've provided a platform for that. And that's great. I think we need more of them.
Thank you. Yeah, I am at this point, full circle, so to speak, not full circle, but there's a point in which now I'm reading not just chip on my shoulder, anti-apologist, Christian, once now deconverted kind of thing. I do that too. Don't get me wrong, because I still think it's ridiculous, in my opinion, to think some of this stuff literally happened. But there's a moment where I also wonder if I'm at an advantage that someone who might choose a path, say like yourself, you can indulge with Inanna, you can indulge with Zeus and stuff, but maybe you have a favorite kind of within the custom you're in. You like the Judaic custom. I feel like this maybe with James Tabor, because he's like you. He loves the Jewish custom. Where I really get into Heracles. I really like, there's something about like almost believing in a make-believe way when I'm indulging in the mythos of Heracles, Dionysus, Asclepius, or even Inanna, Ishtar, talking about Baal and Yahweh as, very much within the Canaanite world. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I have the freedom. Plus, I also think there might be even some connections between some of these deities and in the Bronze Age and antiquity, where there might be overlap and continuity from earlier Mesopotamian, Hittite, all this Aegean, the Egyptian, shared customs, shared beliefs about the deities. And I think to myself, like, I may be a little bit more fortunate, because here's the thing. What you just described about atheists that feel like there's something missing, I feel like they filled that hole with attack on apologists, and it becomes almost like a religious thing to go against. I am the against them kind of, I'm going to show them that this is superstition. I'm going to show them. Whereas I do that. It's part of things I do, but there's a moment where I'm like, I wish they loved the Bible like I did. And I'm trying to make the atheists go, no, don't throw the damn book out. That book ain't going nowhere. Let me just tell you, it ain't going nowhere. Love the material, but let's look at it differently now. Let's understand the flaws. I guarantee you could hold hand in hand with a rabbi and go, yep, that's a problem. Yep, I agree with you. I'm not saying that you need to go through a rabbi to do that. I'm just making the point that even those who cherish this from the get-go are willing to contend with it. They wrestle with God, like you said. So I'm all about unraveling that. And to me, it's like a religious experience. There was a debate. I'll end on this. Christine Hayes had a debate with a rabbi over the Talmud or the Mishnah. I can't remember which. And the rabbi criticized her, saying, if you're not reading this as how do I apply this to my life? How do I do this? How do I do that? Based on reading this, you're doing it wrong, and you're not respecting this material the way it needs to be respected. And she says, with all due respect, that's how you engage this material, and that's your religious experience. She said, my religious experience is asking, when the rabbi wrote that, why did he say that? And she explained that her religious experience was through this historical critical analysis and unraveling and what are the customs and traditions behind and how. And to me, I feel like I'm getting that kind of hole is filled psychologically by laughing along with Euripides Bacchae, by reading Homer and going, oh, Achilles said what? I get the same kind of thing, except without the radicalism I had from that literal, you must believe this, you're going to go to hell, damning kind of worldview I came out of.
Right.
So that leads me to one question for you.
Sure.
You grew up with the Judeo-Christian worldview. You came out of a particular church. I kind of wanted to ask you within that framework about the British Israelitism, as I've heard it said, or even some will go so far as saying Christian identity. The reasons you guys celebrated those customs, you're talking about Jewish customs, were already in your pocket as you grew up. Was that out of that kind of we are Israelites?
Yeah, definitely. And to make it clear, I do not hold any British Israelite views today at all. Like, to me, British Israelism or Black Hebrew Israelism, it's kind of it's all wrong. It's based on wrong historical stuff, and they're kind of trying to adopt certain Jewish customs when Judaism has existed all along and is still here today. And it's like, if you want to be a Jew, just become a Jew. But yes, growing up in this British Israelite cult, it familiarized me with all these Jewish customs and things. And that's why it was kind of a gateway to Judaism, and I'm comfortable within Judaism. But it is at the same time very different, because in British Israelitism, white Europeans are the true Israelites, and Jews are bad and white people are good, and it gets very racist. And you obey all this Old Testament Hebrew Bible stuff because you're the actual Israel and all this sort of stuff. So it's complicated. There's connections, but again, it's very different. It's kind of like doing certain things, but for the wrong reasons.
Right. It's kind of funny you say that, because Twitter is one of the most toxic places I've ever been at on social media today. I've never seen anything like this. And I don't know if it's because I got to read some of this ridiculous stuff, and then it's feeding me more of it. And I'm like, oh, Ron, what are you doing? Am I destroying myself by reading this stuff or watching this stupid video? In it, though, there's like this growing trend of, you can tell, white Europeans who are saying Jesus wasn't even Jewish. Yeah. They're so like, it's ridiculous, but like they're trying to make him not even Jewish because they hate Jews so much that they can't have their dude become Jewish. And then they're having disputes with each other, asking each other to get DNA tests on themselves to find out how much Jewish stuff is in their blood. And it's insane. And they use it as like a gotcha. I think someone told me that they called me a Jew, that I'm Jewish. And I was like, that's weird. By the way, I haven't had my DNA test done, but I kind of want to get it tested. But I'm also thinking to myself, my mom and dad, I think one of them, they had a DNA test, and I know my half sister did, and like 96, 97% European. And I'm like, I wonder what they would do if I ended up with that much percentage European and I threw it in front of them and I had more than they did. It's like, would the delusion go away? Would the hate dissipate? It's insane. Anyway, sorry, I just derailed.
This obsession with DNA and race and all that is a very modern phenomenon. It didn't exist in ancient times. Like, you could be a part of a tribe, and it didn't matter like who your actual biological ancestors were. You once you join a tribe, you're in the tribe, or you could be a Roman citizen and be black, yellow, white, whatever. Mm-hmm. So this is a very modern, very racist, very awful way of dividing people based on blood. I mean, these days, I mean, most Americans are a mix of so many different things. That's not to say that race doesn't exist. I think race exists because we've racialized people. And so, take Black Americans, they were treated so poorly because we racialized them and treated them poorly. So yeah, we need to recognize that Black American is a category, and therefore these people need, be treated in a certain way because of how they were treated in the past. So, but at the same time, yeah, race is a construct. It doesn't exist. And, it's never a good thing to kind of like, base things on blood, and we're good and they're bad, and blah, blah, blah. And we're the real Jews and they're the fake Jews, and blah, 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 blah. It's no end of horribleness.
No, and that's why your charts, for those who want true salvation. Okay, no, but your charts, you could do a family tree, of course. Do you have one that shows us coming out of Africa?
Kind of. But actually, no, that's actually on my agenda. Because I have the timeline of world history, and it starts at 3300 BCE. I want to do a timeline of prehistory that maybe starts at maybe 100,000 or 75,000 years ago, and shows kind of the out of Africa and Neanderthals and the little Hobbit guy down in Indonesia and how all that happened. But yeah, at the end of the day, we are all connected.
Of course.
Not only are all humans connected, but we're also connected to the animal kingdom. And then if you go back far enough, to plants and mushrooms as well. So, yeah. So on one hand, we need to recognize that we're all one, but at the same time, celebrate our differences, Of
course. And that's, I guess my point is that, like, no matter what you do, there's someone who's going to try to do some crazy stuff. But I do hope people watching, will go subscribe to your YouTube channel, check out your website, UsefulCharts.com. And also, you can get the book on Amazon right now. Soon, hopefully, things can get better between us and Canada. And we can actually make sure that you're able to get the books here for American buyers. And I love what you do, Matt. You've been such a huge help, man. You're a great individual. I love this deep dive into thinking through some of this stuff. There's so much more we can touch on. But is there anything you'd like to say as we're wrapping up here to the audience?
Yes. We are MythVision. I was going to say that. Sorry.
Well, we have to say it together. We have to say it together. So make sure help support him.
You do the countdown.
I will. You'll get. I'll let you know. So do subscribe. Do check both of us out. Help us out, man. We could use all the help we can get. I think we have a good vision of how we would like to see the world going down. And if you share that, support what we're doing. We're here to educate you in different ways. And it's not even just us. I'm sure Matt's using academic sources left and right all day long, like I am, to try and get to the bottom of solving the riddle in a Socratic way. So with that being said, I hope you'll never forget, ladies and gentlemen, 3, 2, 1. We are MythVision.